Have you ever really thought about how the Australian criminal justice system works, from start to finish? Well, today, we're going to take that exact journey. We'll go from the very definition of a crime all the way through policing and into the courtroom. Let's dive right in.
So, first things first, what actually makes an act a crime? You might think it's as simple as just, doing something wrong. But in the eyes of the law here in Australia, it's usually a bit more complicated than that.
See, for most crimes, the prosecution has to prove two essential ingredients. It's not enough to show what you did, they also have to get inside your head and prove what you were thinking when you did it.
And of course, because it's the law, these two ingredients have fancy Latin names, Actus Reus and mens rea. Actus Reus is the physical act, the doing of the thing. Think of it as physically taking a wallet from someone's pocket. But mens rea is the guilty mind, the intention to actually steal it. Generally, you need both for a conviction.
Okay, but hold on. What if your intention doesn't matter at all? Is it possible to be found guilty of something you didn't actually mean to do? Well, the answer is a big, fat yes. And this is a huge exception to that two-part rule we just talked about.
And this is where something called strict liability enters the picture. For some specific offenses, often things related to public safety, all the prosecution has to prove is that you did the act. Your intent? Totally irrelevant. The classic example is speeding. It really doesn't matter if you meant to go over the limit. The act of speeding is enough to be guilty.
Now, to keep all this organized, the system groups crimes into different categories. As you can see, we've got everything from offenses against a person, like an assault, all the way to property crimes, driving offenses, and drug offenses. This whole system just helps make sure the legal response kind of fits the crime.
So, let's say a crime has been reported. Now what? Well, this is where police get involved, which brings us to the next stop on our journey, police powers in action. We're talking from that first interaction on the street right through to what happens at the station.
An arrest is way more than just slapping on some handcuffs. It's a really formal legal process, and it has some super strict rules. The officer has to tell you why you're being arrested, and they have to identify themselves, name, rank, and station. These aren't just details, they're basic safeguards to make sure police are acting with transparency.
And arrests don't always happen right there on the spot. Sometimes, police will go to a court first and get a warrant. This means a magistrate has already looked at the early evidence and given the police the legal green light to make that arrest.
Okay, so an arrest has been made. The next big focus is gathering the evidence. This part is absolutely critical, and it's surrounded by its own set of strict rules to make sure everything is done by the book and the evidence is solid.
Yep, there are serious guidelines for everything. We're talking about how police can search people and places, how they collect the evidence, how it's stored securely, and even how it's disposed of later. This whole meticulous process is all about protecting the integrity of the case.
And a huge part of gathering evidence is the police power to seize property. If an officer has reasonable grounds to believe an item is connected to a crime, whether it's a phone, a car, a laptop, they have the authority to take it as evidence.
All right, so all of this, the arrest, the evidence collection, it's all building up to one final destination, the courtroom. Here in Australia, we use what's called an adversarial system. And honestly, you can think of it like a structured legal battle.
So on one side, you have the prosecution, representing the state, trying to prove the case. And on the other side, you have the defense, whose job is to argue for the accused person. Each side presents their evidence and their arguments, both trying to convince the court that their version of the story is the right one.
But they're not just yelling at each other in an empty room, right? There's a third, absolutely vital player on the field, the impartial judge. The judge is like the neutral referee, making sure both sides follow the rules. And in many trials, it's the judge who makes that final, critical decision.
So for our final stop, let's talk about a concept that weaves through this entire process. It's called the discretionary decision, and it's all about the human element in policing, where the black and white law meets the gray areas of real life.
Police have what's known as discretionary power. What does that mean? It means they have the authority to make judgment calls based on the specific situation in front of them. Should they issue a warning for a minor traffic violation or a ticket? Should they make an arrest or not? These are decisions made in the moment, often under a lot of pressure.
And that really leaves us with a massive question, doesn't it? Is this police discretion an absolutely essential tool that allows for nuanced justice in a complicated world? Or does it open the door to potential bias and unfairness? It's that constant balancing act that lies at the very heart of policing today.